doing. So hello and welcome to this program of the University of Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center. We are very pleased to be able to bring you these educational programs to help support small businesses. Please be advised that we will be recording this conversation for ASB/TDC education purposes, but as registrants and attendees of the conversation, you will be emailed a copy of this recording and any links that are posted in the chat or other useful information. I will introduce Chris momentarily, but first I'd like to introduce us and tell you a little bit about ASB/TDC. I am Amy Robinson. I'm a specialty consultant with the Small Business Development Center. If you don't know about the Small Business Development Center, it is a one-stop shop for startups and existing small businesses. We are associated with the University of Arkansas, and we are affiliated with the SBA and statewide ASB/TDC, as well as and that is part of a national network of more than 1,000 small business centers. So you've got a lot of support out here. Locally, we offer complimentary one-on-one consulting and programs like these. We cover the relevant topics for business owners, and if you are not already a client, we encourage you to visit us at sbtdc.uark.edu. After this presentation, you can find all of our programs, this recording, and some of the other tools that we offer to help support your business. I'm going to go ahead and post those in the chat now, and I'll post them at the end as well so that you can find them later. Today, we are bringing you a leadership program with Chris Case about how to rethink and rebuild your ideal team. We know that this is a relevant topic because after the past year, things have gone every which way, and this has been a shout out from you, small businesses, a topic that is really important to you. We love this format because it gives you an opportunity to talk with experts, ask the questions that you have, and work through whatever challenges you or your small business may be having. So this is an interactive workshop. You are encouraged to ask questions as we go along. Please keep yourself on mute until you have a question, or if you have a comment, then please feel free to unmute or use the little raise hand feature or post in the chat. I will be monitoring that very closely. So if you don't want to speak up, just put it in the chat and I will share that with Chris. And now, without further hesitation, Chris is an ASB/TDC specialty consultant along with me, and she has vast experience in her field around leadership. But I'm going to turn it over to her so that she can tell you more and get us started. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Amy. Hi, everybody. I am really excited to be here. So to kind of give you a little bit about me, I started my business back in 1993, and I really saw a need back then to really help businesses, and especially the most important part of their business, the people, and have them communicate and build the bond a little bit deeper so there's success for both. So, and I've done that through consulting and facilitation and coaching. But here's the bottom line. With your businesses, it is key who you have working with you and for you. You've got to make sure that you hire the right people. You've got to make sure you put them in the right seat. And then you've got to make sure that you give them the tools to succeed. So you guys have a lot on your plate. You're wearing a lot of different hats. But that's why we thought it would be so important to bring you what we're bringing you today, how to kind of rebuild and rethink your team kind of in a different way. So we're going to cover a lot in the next hour and a half, and I want to leave enough time at the end for questions. But first, I want to talk about understanding behaviors. Danny and Asher are on here, and they worked with me on the disc before, so they're going to kind of have a jump ahead with what they do with the understanding the behaviors. But we're going to do that. We're going to do working with different generations and how those different generations, getting them in the right seat and making sure that you understand which generation would be beneficial for you to hire. And then I'm going to throw in emotional intelligence, because I've got some really good statistics that emotional intelligence has an impact, an immediate impact on your bottom line. So I'll throw in some statistics and kind of a little bit more information about that. And then last, we've been getting at the ASB/TDC a lot of questions about hiring. And so last night I threw this last piece in, and we're going to talk a little bit about building your dynamic team, hiring, making sure they're in the right seat, and then giving them the tools to succeed. So let's start with behavior. And hopefully, I know that Miss Julie sent out a link for you guys all to take the free DISC assessment. If you did not, don't worry about it. You can take it after this seminar. But make sure that you do take it, because it's going to tell you a little bit more about each one of you, your strengths and your opportunities, and how you communicate. So if you haven't already, make sure that you do that after this session. Now, behavior is the mirror in which everyone displays his own image. So we all, no matter who we are, business owners, relationships, communication, leaders, we all have our behavior, and it's the front, kind of the front piece. It's the mirror in which we display everything about us. So it's really important that you understand the behavioral styles. So not only your behavioral style, but how other people act also. So let me give you kind of a big picture to start off with. This is a lot of information, and I know that Amy said that we're going to send this presentation out to you, so you will have more time to take a look at it. But we have 4 different behavioral styles. So if you take the DISC assessment, which is one that I use, or there's a lot of other assessments out there, a lot of times they boil the behavioral part of it down into these 4 different categories. They might name them something different, but the DISC is, the first category is dominance. The second category is influence. The third is steadiness. And the fourth is conscientious. Even if you guys have not taken the DISC assessment, you're going to pretty much be able to place yourself in one of those quadrants here pretty soon with explaining them. Now, they have a lot of differences, but they also have similarities. So the dominant and the influential group of people, they are very fast-paced. They're very assertive. They like a lot going on. So you're going to see those 2 groups with that similarity, where the opposite, you've got the conscientiousness and the steady, they're a little bit more methodical, a little bit more calm, and they're a little bit indirect. So they're going to kind of be the ones that kind of take the back seat. Then on the left-hand side, you've got the dominance and the conscientious. That group of people, their similarity is they're all about the tasks, where opposite, the influence and the steadiness are all about the people. So you'll see that they've got a lot of differences, but they also have some similarities amongst each other too. So again, here's the link, and I know that Amy put it in the chat box too, but here's the link for you to take that free assessment if you want to. You can also upgrade and get a more in-depth assessment, I think, for $15. So the free assessment will give you a really good start into your behavioral style. When you take that assessment, you're going to pay attention to the black dot, the black circle. So on page 3, you'll see after you take the assessment where you land. So you will probably land in one of these 4 quadrants. Now, if you take the other assessment, it might look a little bit different. So just know what it's going to do is it's going to show you or tell you which behavioral style that you are primarily. When you take the assessment, I would really recommend that you think of yourself at work, because you're going to be a little bit different from work and home. So when you think of yourself at work, you'll see where you're dominant. In this graph, if you take this assessment, you'll notice that the dot is in the D quadrant, but it's kind of down toward the C. If I looked at this, I would think this person has a primary behavioral style of D, which is dominant, and then a secondary style of C. Now, if you click again and you go to page 5, if you take this particular assessment, you'll see the results, the different colors. They've got a huge amount of D, the green, a huge amount of S, but they still have I or C. They've got a huge amount of C, but they still have I and S in them. What's so important about this is I think we tend to think our primary style is one that we just kind of are stuck in. We have a combination of all 4. So don't let this kind of be an excuse and say, well, I'm a D, I'm blunt, I am who I am, because you do have the opportunity for the other styles too, and actually to adjust them and improve those areas too. Let's talk about the Ds. Now, I want you guys to think, because at the end of this section, I've got an exercise that I want you to do where I have you think of 3 people that you work closely with that you think I'm explaining at this point. So jot down those names as we're talking about it. But the D, the bottom line with the D, they're dominant. So at the end of the day, they're all about results. That's what they're focused on. They're focused on the bottom line. They're focused on getting the accurate data so they can make decisions. They're focused on results. So because they kind of put the people part of it on the back burner just a little bit. When you do talk to them, they will be more direct. They will be more blunt. They will be maybe come across as a little impatient. So with this group, you've got to remember that they like to make decisions. They make decisions because they want to hit the results at the end of the day. And they're going to make those decisions with a lot of information, but they want the data. They want the statistics and the information. They don't want the emotion. So one of the things, let me go on to this next slide. I love to give tips with these individuals because there are really key things that you can do to improve the leadership style with these individuals, communication, and just the bottom line, the relationship. So with the D's don't want to get emotional. So if you go into their office and you're emotional, they're probably going to turn you off right then. They want the information. They want you to be quick and brief. The key thing with the D's, if you go into their office or you give them a call or text them and you've got a problem, they want you to come to them with solutions. 1 or 2, 3 is even better, but they don't want you to come bring a problem and land it in their lap because that's a distraction for them. That kind of gets them off their task of getting to the results at the end of the day. So when you do take them a problem, make sure you do take them a solution, and that will be huge for this group of people. Now, I'm going to pause there for a moment, and I want to see if anybody has any questions about that behavioral style, the dominant style.
I'd also love to know if anybody has this person or feels like maybe they are this person. You had asked everybody to maybe start jotting down some names of people, either employees, maybe even people that you've worked for in the past. I'd really love to know if anybody recognizes this this personality.
Excuse me. They're really easy to recognize. This group is one that you'll see from a mile away because they are direct, they're fast paced, they like to make decisions, and they will make a decision and they won't apologize for it. So if they're in a meeting, they're going to bring about their ideas. They're going to want you to hear their ideas. So this group will be pretty easy. So again, write down 3 names of people that work for you or with you that you think have these characteristics. They're fast, they're blunt, they're to the point, they like to multitask, and they really like to be the lead. Maybe it's the boss, maybe it's the lead of that project, but they really want to head things up. Okay, let's move on to the I's. So the I's, at the end of the day, the I's are all about relationships. Remember that these guys, along with the S's, are all about relationships and people. This group, they have the similarities with the D's because they're very active, they're very outgoing, but we'll be able to distinguish them differently from the D's because this group of people are more friendly. And what I mean by that is they want to know more about you. They'll ask you how you're doing. They'll ask you how your kids are doing. They'll spend a little bit more time on the personal part of the conversation, where the D's will probably get in there and say, okay, I called for this meeting because I want to, at the end of this meeting, make this decision. So these two are, although they've got similarities in their pacing, they are completely different in what they feel is beneficial at the end of the day. So the I's, they are people oriented. They're very optimistic. You'll understand who this group of people are too. They'll be easy to detect because they're very friendly. Everything's always positive. They want to make sure that you're good. They'll do anything for you. They'll listen. They're very good at inspiring other people. And this group of people are probably the best networkers out of all 4 categories because they are focused on people and they are outgoing. So these will be a great group of people, maybe at the front desk as a receptionist, as a hostess, anything with customer service, anything dealing with people. This group is not going to thrive if you put them by themselves at the end of the hall in front of a computer and they're working by themselves. That is not going to be the right seat for them. That might be the right seat for the C's, which I'll get to in a little bit. But this group of people need to be interactive. They thrive on it. This group is one that if they are all in, they will be your biggest cheerleaders because they are active and they're outgoing. They will spread the word like wildfire. On the opposite, this group of people will also be sometimes your worst cheerleader because if they are discouraged and they don't feel appreciated at work, they will let everybody know about that also. So just make sure with the I's, you realize that they've got to be fulfilled by doing things that have anything to do with people. Here's the 3 bottom things about the I's. You need to have a friendly approach with them, and it doesn't need to take up all day. You can just ask them how they're doing. You know, I heard you had a great weekend. Just be just a little bit more personable with this group of people than probably all of the other 3. This group will not react well if you scold them or discipline them in public. They're going to be the group that you need to take beside, maybe back in the back office and talk to them a little bit. If you do scold them in public and they're embarrassed, they will again probably be some of the worst cheerleaders for you because you will have embarrassed them, and they're all about people and their relationships. So hence the I for influential. That's what's important to this group of people. This is how easy it is to really make sure that these people feel appreciated. Just a simple thank you is key. If they've stayed late, you know, thanking them for staying late. If they've taken on other job duties during the day that aren't their usual job duties, just a simple thank you. It's a long way with the I's. So again, the I's will be pretty easy for you guys to detect. They're fast-paced, they're outgoing, and they're very friendly. I'm going to pause here again. I want to see if anybody has any questions about the I's, the influential group. How many of you think you're an I? Raise your hand. Lee? Mm-hmm. Matt, yep. Lindsay, I think you're an I.
You do? I'm multitasking because I'm doing the quiz over here because I'm curious earlier. Yeah, I think there's some D in me too, right? But,
yes, during our meetings, Lindsay has a lot of really good ideas, and she is not shy about sharing her great ideas. So thank goodness for that. So I do think you have D and I in you. Amy, what are you?
I am predominantly, I'm the enthusiast. I'm predominantly an I. I definitely have my D and S and C are all pretty equal. They're a lot smaller, but they're pretty equal.
Okay, great, great. And I'll get to what I think Julie is in just a little bit. Okay, which happens to be next. So the third behavioral style is the steadiness style. At the end of the day, this group is all about status quo. They're the happiest if they come to work, they get the job done without any drama, and they go home. This group is very even keel. They're really hard to detect. So when I'm asking you to think of 3 people, this group is probably going to be the hardest to think of because they are quiet. They are a little bit more reserved. They sit back and they take everything in. I've been consulting, like I said, since 1993. And when I go into businesses, the people that I try to track down are the S's. And here's why. They're loyal, they're dedicated, and they've worked there probably a long time. They've sat back and they've listened, so they know information about other people. They know more information about the business, and even about maybe some simmering conflict that's going on under the way. But they're the group of people that are gathering all the information. Now, here's why people get frustrated with the S's. They need the information before they make a decision or before they give their feedback or speak up. So I get a lot of calls where they'll say, you know, Al, I know he's an S, but in our meetings, I really need him to participate more. Well, Al's probably not going to do that because he's got to sit back, and before he talks and offers any information, he's going to make sure that he's very comfortable with that information he's offering. So you're going to need to give this group of people just a little bit more time to make decisions. And I mean it, when you do, you'll get some really solid decision and information coming out of this group. They're very easy to get along with. They love being on teams. They're great at handling excited people and under pressure because, again, they'll just kind of sit back and be the calming force without even saying anything. They don't like to be rushed. And one thing about this group, I think, is the critical thing is change is huge for them. Change just to change does not make sense to this group of people, and they will buck every way. They need to have an update. Maybe let them know why the change is coming. Let them know what the reasons are for the change. But if you just kind of give them an update before you really roll out the change, you'll get this group on board quicker and easier. And it's really important to do that because everybody usually in the organization knows this individual. They've demonstrated credibility through their dedicated and loyalty. And so they're going to watch how the S's react in a circumstance like that. So with the S's, you've got to be transparent. This group of people are real people. They want the truth. They want the facts. They want you to sit back and let them really think and go over the information before they answer. But being transparent and loyal are really key to this group of people. And then make sure not to rush their ideas, because when you do, you'll not only make them feel uncomfortable, but you're not going to probably get the best out of them than if they sit back just for, it might be 5 minutes, it might be a day. But they really need to sit back and really kind of mull over all the information that they have before they bring about a decision. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. Julie, you're an S, am I right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. So did I say anything there that was not true about you?
No, I handle change maybe a little bit better than the way that, but no, this is pretty right on. For
Okay,
sure.
good. And with change now, you've been in the position for a long time, and you know the individuals that you work with. You know Mary Beth very well as your leader. So a lot of S's will not buck change if they really have, if they're working for the right person, if they've got the right leader, if they trust the people that they're working with, they will jump on board quicker than not. But if maybe somebody just out of the blue came up and said to you, Julie, we're going to change how we're doing the meetings. Instead of having 2 meetings a week, we're going to go back to 5. You're going to need more answers for that before you jump on board and say, okay, we can do this. But I think it's who you work with.
Totally agree.
Good. Anybody else out there with an S? Do you think you're an S? Okay. I know, Danny, I know your wife is an S. We've talked about that before too. So I know I'm explaining her as we're going along. Okay, let's move on to the last but not least, the C's. Excuse me. So the C's, these out of all 4 different behavioral styles are unique in their own way because they're analytical. At the end of the day, they're all about accuracy, correctness, diplomatic, their rules and regulations, black and white. They are very, they focus on the data and the statistics a lot more even than the D's. They're not going to make a decision until they've crunched those numbers and really came up with a solid answer in form of numbers or statistics or data. They're big on being motivated by correctness. So if you are correct, you're going to earn credibility with them. If you send them a spreadsheet and maybe you've made 2 or 3 mistakes on there, you're going to lose credibility overnight. So think about the 3 people that you think land in this category. They're going to be the ones, again, if they want you to follow the rules like everybody else. Rules and regulations were put in place for a reason. They're the group that I was saying earlier that wouldn't mind being at the end of the hall in front of a computer by themselves because they like to work independently. They will get the work done. If you've got them in the right seat, they're going to get the work done every time you ask them to, because again, they're focused on the analytics and they thrive on that. They probably won't be the group of people that go out to lunch with you or come in the break room for a potluck in most cases, especially if they've got a project that they're working on. And a lot of people will assume that they're being aloof or they just don't want to be a part of the team, and that's not true. Their part of the team is making sure that the data and the information is accurate. And so they spend a lot more time really crunching that information to get it right. Here's 3 tips about the C's that I want to make sure that you know about. They want you to be professional. So they're, again, like the D's, they don't like a lot of emotion in a conversation or with an issue. They just want you to be professional, come in with the facts, and they'll work with you on that. They don't show emotion themselves. So again, they get a hard rap a lot of times because they aren't participating in all the team and the out of work activities. They're going to be the ones getting the job done behind the desk. And the key thing with this group of people is you've got to be accurate, because at the end of the day, their whole focus is on accuracy, not only from themselves, but from other people. Something else with the C's, and I get this question a lot, C's and conscientiousness people are being difficult because they ask why a lot. They ask why because they've got to have it make sense in their head. They've got to connect the dots. They don't ask why because they're trying to be difficult. So let's say you're giving them a project and they'll say, why are we doing this project? You'll give them the answer. They'll ask why again. We tend to think that they're being difficult in questioning us as leaders, and that's not true at all. What they're doing is, again, they're just trying to make sure they make sense of the information and of the direction, and that the dots are being connected. So can you guys all think of 3 C's? Danny, I think you have a lot of C in you. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that definitely explains me. I definitely am not emotional, especially in my work, and I don't really care about like the social aspects. So that makes sense.
Well, and every time we ask you a question, you come up with facts that back it and data that backs it. You thrive in that area, and it's so beneficial to our team too.
Well, thank you. I hope so.
It absolutely is. Anybody else that thinks that you have a lot of C in you? So Danny said, yes, don't show emotion and accuracy is important. Okay, good. So we've got an S and a C. How many of you guys are having trouble thinking of those 3 people that are landed in each category? Did you all think of at least 2 or 3 people for the dominant, the influential, the steadiness, and the conscientious? Anybody having trouble there?
Anybody have them? How many people have them in your professional world? I bet you're probably also thinking of people in your personal world. That's the other benefit of exercises like this, is that we were like, oh, I all of a sudden see my partner in a different light.
Absolutely. My husband coaches, so he is an absolute D with his athletes, but he comes home and he's an S. I mean, he can't make a decision to save his life, which works great for us because I'm a D all the way around. So it really works.
Joanne's got an interesting one. 50% D and the other half is equally split between ICS. That's interesting.
Well, that is interesting. So okay. Well, and Danny was saying that he has a combination of all 4, which, you do. I've had one person, you guys, in all these years where they didn't have a dominant or primary or secondary style. They were all 4 almost equally. One person in 25 years. So usually it's not that even. I've never seen that before. You usually have one dominant style.
Mm-hmm.
And we are recording. I saw that in the chat. We are recording and we'll send this out too.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay, so communication and conflict. Right now, I think why it's so important to go over the different behavioral styles is because what we've all lived through these last few months, our stress levels are higher, and that part of our behavior is really starting to step out a little bit more. So if you're a D, you might be a little bit more aggressive or outspoken than what you were before. And S might be a little bit more reserved and not have anything to say. So it's the stressors that are coming out right now are gonna be a lot more out there than what they normally are. So I wanted to add this slide in there about communication and conflict. And again, we've talked about a little bit of this, but with the dominant, being direct and being brief and to the point. But here's the bottom line with them. They want to know the what. So if you've asked them the question, they want to know what's the deadline? What is the result that you want? They want to know the what of the question. If you can answer that for them, their stressors will go down and they'll be able to get the job done. With the I's, they want to know the who. Who's going to be on my team? Who is our client? If you can answer the who's, they will immediately, because again, they're more personable and they like the people side of things, they need to connect on the relationship side. So if they know a person that they're working with or they're getting to know somebody, they want to know who. That's going to be a key indicator for them. And then the S's are about how. And especially when we're talking about the change, they'll accept the change if you can explain to them how it's going to happen. How's it going to affect them? How's it going to affect their job or their department or their team? If you can explain the how, they're going to be key with the team and the project that you're working on. And like I said earlier, the conscientious, they're all about the why. They'll ask why probably 3, 4, 5 times during a conversation. Once they absolutely understand it and can connect the dots and it makes sense to them, they will be on board. So here's why I wanted you guys to think of 3 people for each one. Again, this is going to be your exercise. You can either do it now or you can do it after this session. But the 3 people that you're thinking about, if you don't know what they are, I'm giving you kind of a map so it will explain a little bit easier. So what you do is you really pretty much ask 2 questions. The first one is, are they outgoing and direct, or are they reserved and indirect? If they are, you're going to place them in those 2 buckets. Are they outgoing and direct, or are they reserved and indirect? After you put them in those 2 buckets, then you've got your second question. Are they focused on tasks, or are they focused on people? So if they're outgoing and direct and focused on tasks overall, they're going to be a D. If they're outgoing and direct and focused on people, they're going to be an I. And then on the opposite, if they're reserved and indirect and focused on people, they're going to be an S. And if they're reserved and direct and focused on the tasks, they're going to be a C. So again, I just want to make sure that you guys write down 3 names for each one of those buckets. And then when you do, I want you to write down 3 things that you can do to build a better relationship. So it might be a D, and it might be somebody that's in your life every day that maybe you guys go head to head with. If it is, maybe one of the things that you can work on is, like I said earlier, taking them a solution. They don't want to hear complaining. They don't want to hear drama or backstabbing. They want the problem and the solution. So that might be something that you could work on with the Ds. And maybe with the Cs, they want factual information. So don't just come in and give them a big picture idea. They want, okay, how are we going to do this? And give me all the facts and the statistics for that, and then I'll back it. Any questions about the exercise for the first part, for the behavioral part of this session?
Curious if anyone has someone in mind, personal or professional, that you are keying in on as, oh, that might be some of our disconnect or some of our miscommunication or any of those other things. I'm just curious if anybody is kind of honed in on somebody that they're like, oh, that would be why. So you're kind of thinking about yourself. Yeah, kind of thinking about yourself, but kind of thinking about somebody in particular. Danny, would you care to kind of maybe talk about that person a little bit? If you're willing to, we'd love to hear that.
Sure.
Yeah,
I didn't know if you're talking about other Danny.
I was talking about other Danny because she posted her thing, because they posted Danny.
The male Danny
boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. The guy Danny.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
hear you.
Yes, we have a person that works for us in our retail area who falls in under the C category, and I've really been having a hard time, I guess, communicating with her and I guess meshing. And so I see this and it made me think of, oh, okay, I understand that a little more. So
Good. Because again, Danny, you got to remember what she is. She's not, in most cases, she's not trying to be difficult. In order to do her job, it's got to make sense to her analytically in her head. And so for me, you could tell me something and I'll just take it and run with it because I'm a D and I want to get it done. And at the end of the day, it's all about results. But it's got to make sense to a C. And if it doesn't, they're going to ask a lot of questions. And we really kind of misinterpret that as them being difficult. You know, why are they questioning my authority? I gave them something to do. I'm the boss. They need to do it. If you want to get the most out of people, and that's why it's so important, this behavioral part of it, the old way of leading is gone. You know, I say it, you do it, or you go. You have to make sure that you understand their behavioral style, and you've got to make sure that you really lead them by that. And with the C's, it's sometimes just sitting back, and as frustrating as it might be, sitting back and taking the time to answer their questions, because once it makes sense, they're going to take off and you won't hear from them again until the project is done.
That's great. Danny.
Any other?
Danny and Lindsay, now that you're figuring each other out, girl Danny, woman Danny and, and Lindsay, and figuring each other out. She just said that you may want, you may need to talk about working with Lindsay, Danny. But once you know some of these things, are these things that you've been learning about each other and kind of adapting? Can you see those adaptations?
Absolutely. I thought whenever we talked about how Deanie was like, I really don't care about the personal stuff, like that made me giggle a little bit, because she is just like to the point, and I can be a little bit more like, because Danny, think about it, like I'll ask you questions. I'll be like, so how was your day today? Or where are you off to next? And anyway, so I mean, it's not that she's not interested in knowing those things about me, but we're in a work relationship, and she wants to make sure that we get those things done. That's what's most important to her.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Good. Okay, well, let's move on again. And I'm going to spend enough time at the end, and I can stand as long as you guys need me to. But if you guys have particular situations or some kind of a relationship that you want to talk a little bit more about, you know, we're here for you. And if it's not today, you know, you can reach out to us anytime. But the next thing I want to talk about are the generations, because right now we have 5 generations in the workforce. And so not only, like I said, you guys have a lot going on and you're wearing a lot of hats. You've got to understand your employees' behaviors and now what generation. But if you're going to hire the right people and put them in the right seat, I know it takes a little bit more work up front to do that, but after that, it's usually smooth sailing, maybe a couple of hiccups, but you've got to make sure you get those 2 pieces right, and the rest will usually fall in place. And so the generations are a big deal right now. The generation with the largest percentage, and I'm going to show you who this is in just a second, I think you guys already know, but they're going to be ones that are going to have the most influence over your culture, over your teams, over your business, over your clients. You know, just think about it. If you got a group of 10 and 5 of those are coming from one generation that have really specific characteristics, they're going to pretty much rule the roost in your organization. So here from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, this is what we're looking at right now. You'll see back in 2015 is really when the 5 generations came into the workforce. I mean, that it was pretty much at the tip of that. But now in 2020 and 2021, you can see solidly we have all 5 generations. The traditionals at the top, they're not retiring. Even the baby boomers are not retiring. So they're going to be in the workforce even longer. Usually we would have 3 or 4 generations we could work with and one would drop off. But now people are working longer and not retiring. You can also see who the leaders are in this group right there, and they're the millennials, okay? So they're the generation Y, and I'll get into that in just a little bit, but they're the millennials that are out there, and I know we give them a bad rap a lot, and we blame them for everything, and they're great at hiring for certain jobs and will thrive. Again, if you hire them for the right position and put them in the right seat, they're great workers. So we'll talk a little bit more about them when we break it down. So I wanted to give you kind of an overall of the bulk of the individuals that you guys will be working with right now. You've got the baby boomers, the Generation X, and the Generation Y. They are who they are and why they are in most cases because of their formative years. There were things that happened when they were growing up that kind of made them who they are. Their work ethic, their way that they want to communicate, them in relationships. It kind of forms them overall with a few exceptions. But you've got the baby boomers that really came in, the Cold War, the Apollo moon landing, Woodstock. They were the ones that were even more family oriented. That's when it was more of the life work balance. That was when that was coming up and really popular. The traditionals were the ones that they went to work, they did their job, they came home, and then the rest of the time was for their families. The baby boomers are now trying to have a balance between the two. Their aspirations are job security. They were actually the first ones with the television. So the first television was sold in 1946. So this group, you know, even the earlier ones had no idea really what a television was until they grew up a little bit. And their communication, they want the telephone. They still go back to the telephone is more personable. They will text, and I'll talk about the text in just a little bit, and email. But a lot of times this is the group that if there's a problem or a situation, they will pick up the phone before they email going back and forth a million times. they'll pick up the phone and take care of the situation. Now, when you lead the baby boomers, you've got to remember, and when they're working for you, they want the same. You've got to defer to them instead of what you would prefer. So if you're having a situation with a baby boomer where they've called in sick a couple times, or maybe something else is going on, pick up the phone and call them and get down to the bottom of it. It might be something as simple as they really have something going on at home where they're legitimately sick and taking off those days, or maybe you've got them in their own seat. So you've got to really think about how to communicate with that group. Then you've got the Generation X, and this group was the end of the Cold War, Live Aid. This group, I think the key experience with them were they were the first latchkey kids. These were the kids that came home to an empty house. Moms had started working more and more, and so they came home without a parent home or a guardian, and they just kind of had to entertain themselves, get their homework done, and be able to communicate and entertain themselves on their own. Work-life balance became critically important here because, again, I think what happened was you had both parents in a lot of situations at work, and they were trying to make up for it at home when especially their kids were going home by themselves and spending a lot of time by themselves. And then the signature product for this generation was the personal computer. And then you've got the Generation Y, which is also the millennials. They were born and raised 9/11, social media, Google Earth, reality TV really took off with them. Their aspirations were freedom and flexibility. So you'll see with the millennials, again, it's key with them more than any other group, in my opinion, to have them in the right seat, because if you don't, they're not going to thrive like they will if you have them in the right seat. So make sure, again, this is where you kind of go back to the behavior. You know, if they're I, make sure they're interacting with people. If they're a C, make sure that they have a lot of time by themselves, that they're working on their own and don't have to depend on a team or another group of people. Okay, so here's the 3 generations. Amy, I want you to, we're going to break each one of these down a little bit more, but is there any other key things about these 3 generations that you want to tap into?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I was going to mention is that generations are broken down by years, as you can see by the graph. And so one of the things to keep in mind is that there are little subcultures within each of those groups of generations. So probably the most common one that you would be familiar with is in Generation Y. So you may have a 24-year-old that got their first phone and access to a lot of digital technology when they were maybe an early teenager or 14, 15 years old. Whereas just a few years later, you have the kid who had it in their hand from birth. No, not really, but younger and younger. And so, so there are subtle cultural differences. So there are pros in the lump summing. There are cons in the lump summing as well. So even what movies were playing, what movies were the generational influences, what world events were the generational influences. You could have a big world event that was just a few years long that that somebody within that same generation may or may not felt or experienced. So that's the only other thing that I would comment on in those is there are kind of like microcultures that go on in between. And so I think Gen Y is one that is very much, you may have a Danny in your midst that knows how to manage her technology use, whereas somebody just a few years younger, maybe are hiring a high schooler is not quite as disciplined. So there are some of those subtleties.
And like an example with Danny just the other day, we were talking about marketing and the social media aspect of it, and realized we've got an expert that's living it. She is a college student. She's a social media expert just by default, and then more. But I mean, we had her right there at our fingertips. When we started asking her questions, she really gave us a lot of good information that we weren't thinking as old geezers. I'm in my mid to late 50s. So I mean, I'm not even thinking about the social media aspect. So, that's what I was saying with the Gen Y and the millennials. They are so keen on what we need in today's world with our social media, even hiring. We had this morning when we were talking about how do you hire? Danny, I'd never heard of Handshake. So if you're going to hire people more for the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry, handshake is where you go for that. I had not heard about that before this morning. So I was, LinkedIn, we could do LinkedIn and Instagram and the old fashioned stuff, but she really just opened our eyes to that. So utilize that group of people because they do know what's going on out there and they will be able to really help benefit that. Okay, just quickly, I don't want to spend a lot more time on generations. You guys are all going to get this PowerPoint. And we also have more information about generations. So if you do want more information, I can send you all the information that you need. But just to kind of break these down a little bit for the communication part of it, the traditionals, again, they're the ones that come to work, they get the job done, they're very loyal, they respect authority, they want appreciation for their efforts. And again, that group of people will be there every day, all day when you need them to be. And then you've got the baby boomers. And this group of people, they want their input. This was the first group of people that really started getting verbal in meetings and with their leaders and their bosses. They wanted to have more say with decisions and feedback and input. And then Generation X, this was the generation, again, they were the latchkey kids. They want straightforwardness, honesty, transparency. They want to focus on the results that are expected. So just being open with this group of people, whether they are being disciplined or promoted or new job duties, if you're just straightforward this group of people, they really appreciate it because that's what they've been born and raised to be straightforward and transparent. And then you've got the millennials. And one thing I wanted to say, they're called the Generation Y also for a reason. They will ask why a lot. They're not going to just do something for the sake of I'm going to tell them and I'm your boss, so you need to go ahead and do it. They want to know the why. Why am I doing this? And why is this going to affect our business and the customers of our business? So you've got to remember with this group, you might need to explain a little bit more, but it's because they have a lot more knowledge in what we're all dealing with today, which is the social media aspect of everything. And then the generation.
Sorry,
go ahead, Amy.
I'll add a little bit on Gen Y and the why. They also like social endeavors. So companies that have a triple bottom line, or you are doing volunteer work or donating, they like to have meaning, not just the why are they doing the work. They want to know what it means to their community, their the world, those kinds of things.
They need purpose, and if there's a purpose, then they're all in. And the Z's, the last group, we're still figuring out a little bit more from them, but it's kind of funny to me, and Amy, you need to pipe in on this one too, but they're kind of going back to, they want one-on-one communication. They want personal, they want to be in front of people. So they're kind of going back to where the traditionals were with communication and relationships. Amy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that, and you can actually look to technology for some of these patterns. So I know that Snapchat seems really impersonal, but it's actually a more personal connection where it is conversational and more interactive and a little more high touch on a regular basis. Whereas I think even the generation before, it was about attention and getting out there and getting the feedback and the likes and the loves and some of those things, or that addiction. This is more the technology that's coming up is more enabling some of those relationships.
Awesome. Okay, so what I want you to do here, and again, we're going to send this presentation out to you guys so you'll get a reminder, but I want you to think of one person that you might be having a little bit of trouble with at work, or maybe you're butting heads and not seeing eye to eye. I want you to then figure out what generation they're from, and we're going to give you all that information on the slides. But then what can you do different? And a lot of times it boils down to us not deferring to them, whether it's how they communicate, what their purpose is, how they want to be led, what kind of teams they want to be on. But understanding that person a little bit better and making sure that they're in the right spot is going to save you so much heartache and time down the road, because they're doing what they want to be doing. And again, behavior is part of it, understanding that, but the generation understanding that and then kind of combining that information together. And that's something, again, that we can help you do and walk through with your hiring processes. So I threw in emotional intelligence too. I kept throwing in stuff more and more, but emotional intelligence is key. And I think a lot of people kind of skip over this because they think it's a little bit fuzzy and touchy-feely, but there are statistics and research out there that prove that emotional intelligence hits the bottom line. It has a huge impact on the bottom line. So I found these three that are pretty key and easy to understand. But at Pepsi, the executives that had the higher the EQs, the emotional intelligence, generated 10% more productivity. They had 87% less turnover. They brought 3.75 million more in value, and their return on investment was 1,000%. L'Oreal, their salespeople with a high emotional intelligence sold on average 2.5 million more than the others. And then Sheridan, they incorporated EQ initiatives and their market share grew by 24%. So all these three businesses really did was they had an understanding of emotional intelligence and how they can use that with their group of people. Emotional intelligence, I'm helping actually a lot of companies hiring based on emotional intelligence also. So there's kind of a new way of getting the right people out there, getting them on board and getting them in the right seat. But I'm just gonna briefly go through this. So emotional intelligence is really understanding and being aware and being able to control your emotions, and that will have an impact on the other individual's emotions. So if you're a leader or if you're an owner of a business, how you are and how you act and how you respond to things will immediately impact the other group of people that work for you. So that's kind of a new way of rethinking your team, is instead of just adamantly leading them, leading by example, making sure that they see that you're there on time, that you keep your cool under pressure, that you don't add to the drama, is so much key to being a leader than anything else that we could do. Leading by example is really the bottom line. So the difference, your IQ, that's kind of our reasoning and our decision making, and that was something that was genetic. Although we can improve it a little bit, we don't have a whole lot of control over that. That's why I love emotional intelligence. It's really the intangible advantage that we have that we might not even know that we had before now. So it is understanding yourself. It is understanding the other people around you and then bringing it all together for success. So just a quick overview of the history. It's been around since the 1960s. So it's been there, it's been named different things. We've had different people doing research on it, but it really started gaining momentum in the 90s. There was a gentleman by the name of Daniel Goldman that started doing research in schools, and he started from a very young age teaching emotional intelligence, you know, how to deal with a situation, how to get along better with other people, how not to overreact. So as kids, he taught these kids all the way through their teens and their 20s. And what he found was those kids that were taught emotional intelligence were 80% more successful in everything, not only their career, but just overall life. So he knew that it was so important in elementary schools. He then started bringing it about into the corporations and the businesses, and it took off. He wrote a book in 1995 called Emotional Intelligence. And although it's not the most intriguing read, I'm going to be honest, it is a great book, and it gives you a lot of information about emotional intelligence and where his mindset is regarding emotional intelligence. So when appreciated, I love statistics and I love to give you guys facts because that's really, they're concrete. You can't argue with the numbers. But when appreciated, 78% of your group of people will be more motivated, 65% will work harder, and 51% will stay with you longer. And again, being appreciated and motivating people, there's a lot of different tactics that I've taught way back from the early 90s. But what we're really finding out is if that person isn't instinctually and internally motivated, you're not going to motivate them. So one of the best ways to do that is for you to understand your actions and how your actions have an impact on them. And then you can really help motivate them doing this. So here's his book. I would highly recommend that you buy this, but it's Daniel Goldman's Emotional Intelligence. And again, it might take you a little time to read it, but he's got a lot of good facts and statistics and research in that proves that this has a huge impact on your team and the bottom line. So 50,000 thoughts. And here I'm just going to kind of summarize this for you. We have on average 50,000 thoughts a day. And what happens is when we have a thought, we then have an emotion, and then we have a behavior. What's happening a lot of times, and why Amy and I are so busy with our coaching, and Allison has jumped in too, we've got a lot of coaching going on, because what's happening is people are going straight from their thought to their behavior. They're missing that middle piece. That's the key piece of every conversation, every conflict, every hiring. You've got to make sure that you have that middle piece. So you've got to make sure when you have a thought, you stop and think about the emotional intelligence before you act or speak, which is the behavior. And what he did, Daniel Goleman really boiled this down into 4 different pillars. And I'm going to zip through this because I want to spend a lot more time on hiring the right people, and how to keep the right people by putting them in the right seat. But the 4 pillars, you have self-awareness, which is the foundation of everything. If you're not self-aware, by maybe taking a DISC assessment or something else, you're not going to be able to build these other pillars off your self-awareness, because you're not going to have the facts. So you've got to be fully self-aware of how you act, how you communicate, and how you're perceived. And then you go into, now I know about me, I can do self-management. And after self-management, the pillar is now social awareness of my surroundings. And then those 3 pillars will build in naturally to relationship management. So self-awareness, the 2 tips I wanted to give you here is, you're already doing it today. So make sure that you do some kind of a behavioral assessment, so you really understand your strengths and the opportunities, how you communicate, how you lead, how you are on teams. The more information that you can know about your behavior, the better. And then ask others about you, because again, we perceive ourselves completely different than other people do. So reach out and ask just a handful of individuals. And again, we've got a great questionnaire that you can do, a lot of things that you can ask the individuals to get the immediate feedback that you need. But you really need to know how you're perceived within your personal life, as a peer, as a leader, as maybe a partner. You've got to understand that. And once you really understand those 2, you will be self-aware, and you'll be able to move on to the other pillars. The next one is self-management. And self-management is really taking the information now that you know. So now I know that I can come across, or seem to come across, as aggressive. What am I going to do about that? How am I going to manage that behavior? Because obviously that behavior is not beneficial to people around me. So once you get those pieces of information, make sure that you really think about each one of those and what you can do to tweak them. You might not all the time necessarily agree with them, but perception is reality. So if somebody else is viewing you or perceives you in a certain way, you've at least got to think about it and take it serious about maybe tweaking that behavior a little bit. And especially now, knowing your emotional triggers. A lot of us were triggered by certain things. We might be triggered by the news, an individual, a circumstance, maybe a conflict that's unnecessary. Make sure you have those off, or you're at least prepared for them. So if I'm going to be having a conversation with an individual at the end of the week that maybe we go head to head with, I'm going to prepare for that before I have that conversation, because I'm going to, again, so now that I'm self-aware, I've got to manage those emotions. And one of the ways to do that is to be prepared for one of my triggers. And then the 4th one is social awareness. So make sure you are aware, even more now than ever before. Reach out to people that you might see that are having a hard time. Maybe you walk into a meeting and you feel kind of the undertone of conflict going on. Maybe do something that you can help with bringing the edge down a little bit. There's a lot of different things that you can do by being socially aware. Over 90% of our communication is nonverbal. So by being socially aware, you're walking into a room and you're reading the body language, you're hearing the tone of voice, you're watching the facial expressions. By being socially aware, you can really take charge and change maybe the momentum of the business meeting, because you have sat back and listened and watched what's going on, and maybe can head that off just a little bit. And then all 4 of those go together to create what really our goal is at the end of the day: relationship management. Having a good relationship with the people that we lead, that work for us, our customers, our clients. When you do those other 3 pillars, it just automatically and naturally comes into relationship management. So just make sure, again, you got to take all that information from before and kind of really put it to use when you're interacting with another person. And I think I added this one at the end when I was adding this whole section, but being empathetic. And what I mean by that is now more than ever, we don't know what people are going through. We have not walked in their shoes. We have no idea. So before you judge or before you jump all over that individual or it lead to conflict, be curious. You know, if you're curious before you judge, you're going to have that time right before then when you're like, okay, maybe something happened at home. Maybe the job is too much. Maybe I don't have them in the right seat. But being empathetic right now is probably the easiest thing and the quickest thing that you can do to bump up your emotional intelligence. And that will, I promise you, affect everybody else that works with you, for you, and in your life. Okay, so here's the exercise before I go on to the last part. So for your emotional intelligence, I really want you to think about, especially the self-awareness piece. What can you do? What can be one action that you can take to make sure that you're more self-aware? You already took the assessment, or if you haven't, make sure that you do. But really study that assessment and make sure that you understand, or if you have any questions, you reach out to us. But make sure you understand the bottom line with you, your behavior, how you act, how you communicate. That would be a great one thing that you can do. And then you can also ask other people. But there are so many different things that you can do to really bump up your emotional intelligence almost immediately. So any questions? I know I talked fast there and had a lot of information, but any information or any questions about emotional intelligence that you want to share?
That was a lot of information. Good information.
I know.
Everybody's still thinking.
Well, go ahead, Amy.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things you had in there, and I wonder if you have a favorite book, talking about conflict. There are a couple of, there is conflict. There's one of my favorites is called Fierce Conversations. So one of the things that people definitely go away from on a regular basis is trying to address conflict. Conflict is not a bad word, right? It is it is a communication barrier. So do you have some other ones? I know that there are a couple of other conflict conversation books out there that you might have recommendations of as well.
I love Crucial Conversations, because I think one of the best things I learned from that book, Crucial Conversations, is when a conversation is escalating, if you just bring it back to the facts, you've got to leave emotion out of it. But if you bring it back to the facts 3 to 5 times, it will de-escalate that conversation. If not, you need to remove yourself, or maybe take a walk, or say, let's get back to this tomorrow. But if you stick to the facts, especially when you're having a disagreement or you're having some kind of a conflict, and bring it back to the facts. Yes, I understand that you're upset, but remember when we talked about this project deadline was going to be April 5th and we all agreed on it. Okay, I understand that you bring it back to the facts 3 to 5 times, and that will really sink in most cases with that individual. So I think that's one of the best things I've learned. And we do a lot of coaching with conflict and crucial and conversations and discussions and disagreements. And it works, you guys, just about every time. Leave the emotion out of it, as hard as it is to do sometimes, and bring the conversation back to the facts. Okay, let's go on to the last part, because I want to leave enough time for questions too, but building the ideal team. So one of the things that we have said before, and I think I've said it a million times in this session, you have got to make sure you hire right. So how do you do that? Well, Lindsay, the other day in our task force meeting, suggested giving them what we call a test. So let me show you. And again, this is a lot of questions, but we can simplify this for you. You can pick out 2 or 3 or 4. But her whole purpose about this was, are they really serious about the job? If they are, so I'm applying with one of you guys in your businesses, and you send me an email and say, okay, can you answer these 5 questions for me? Email those back to me by end of day tomorrow. If I do that, and I take the time to do that, I should probably be moved on to the next step of the hiring process. If I don't do that, that is the quickest way. It took, 15 seconds to send an email. and you have ruled and crossed that person out. Now, I know, again, with the different generations, the traditionals and the baby boomers and stuff, maybe they want maybe a phone call, but I still believe, and Lindsay, I'm going to have you pipe in, and every one of us has, every one of us will answer an email. And most of us have access to a computer. If they don't, that's maybe one of the questions, that you can ask right up front on the application if you have access to a computer. But Lindsay, this really helped you. You were the one that shared this idea.
Correct. And I think, I used it in the form of a Google Doc. I think you could do email, like you said, or even just text them a few of these questions, because, that chart you showed us, that smartphone or the tablet was a lot of what they were most connected to. But what I found was that those that took the time to email this back showed up for the interview, and they turned out to be wonderful employees. The many of them that were stayed with me for quite some time. I gave the example in our meeting that I had a couple friends send their kids my way, and then I emailed them some of these questions and they never responded to the questions. And friends wanted to know, well, why didn't you hire my child? And I told them, well, I sent out information and they never responded to it. So it was just a good way to really identify some good talent, and didn't take really any time on my part.
Because one of the things we keep hearing, you guys, is that you're spending a lot of time trying to hire up front. You're making calls, you're having them come in for interviews, and then they're no showing. And so there's a way to simplify this, and you'll all customize your own simplification process. But I thought that was one of the best ideas, because it tells you, hey, I'm really interested, or I'm just trying to do this because I've got to put a checkbox in my unemployment paperwork. So it just really kind of gets them by that first step, which is really important.
Chris and Lindsay, do you think that this is something that we might be able to put in our toolbox in the website, Julie? Is that something that we could do? Would be helpful to everyone? And if so, I'll go ahead and post that toolbox. We do have toolbox on our website that has things like this and other tools that you might want to use. So I'll post that, and we'll get something up for you.
Awesome. And you might use some of them, you guys, or it might kind of give you some ideas for some other questions to use. But I like that idea. I mean, just text them. We all have a phone. I mean, I don't know anybody that doesn't have a phone. So that's another great way to do it. Okay, so the hiring, the second thing that I think we drop the ball on that we forget a lot is to check the references. Now, I know when people are applying and they write down references, they're writing down their best friend and they're writing down a couple other individuals. But there's key questions that you can ask even those kind of references to make sure that you've got kind of an overall view of that individual. If you do your due diligence before you even set up that very first interview, you're going to be able to weed out a lot of those applicants that are not going to work out from the beginning. And then one of the things I've always recommended to my clients is give them a working interview. So maybe you have not hired and you think you want to, but can you come in and I just want you to shadow for half a day or shadow for a couple hours. If they're willing to do that, and if your other team members really click with them and kind of can give their 2 cents because they've seen them in action, you're going to be able to hire the right person doing that too. Any other ideas from you guys of what you've done to make sure you get the right people?
Like you said, that working interview, I'm here with Miss Christie at Mule Cake, and that's something that we've implemented a lot in our past 4 hiring people, is having them come in and work a full shift, give them a full dish shift. And if they go through it with the same happy attitude, then you'll know that they're actually in this for the long run, not just in it for a job, their stopping point. But I feel like that's helped us a lot here, of actually having someone come in and do a shift and see how they actually work with all of us during a crazy night and see how their work ethic is. But that's really helped us a lot.
That's awesome. And Matthew, can you give us any idea when you do that? Are 90% of them, do the 90% of them turn out to be good employees? But is there kind of some kind of a statistic that you can kind of gauge?
Yeah, Miss Christie's over my shoulder now here, but yeah, I feel like it's actually helped us a lot more of actually getting the right person to come in. And we've had 5, and I think we've stuck with 4 out of the 5. And not that the
Wow.
other 5 wasn't just the best, the best worker, or not a great worker, but it was just the different, the atmosphere and the job of everybody, how they clicked with everyone. It was just not the best fit for some of them. But I mean, we wouldn't have known that after we'd already made that for sure thing. And then, but having that trial period of knowing if they was actually work with everyone here, you know, was helpful a lot.
Well, and we've got to remember, as much as we're interviewing them, in today's world, they're interviewing
They're
us.
interviewing us,
And
yeah.
so that's a live interview both ways. And you know, I might think I want to come and work for a business and I'm all in, and then I get there and I might change my mind. So I'm really doing both of us a favor by doing that. But really, they're interviewing us just as much as we're interviewing them these days.
Yeah. But yeah, that's helped us a lot here.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so then making sure that you've got the right person in the right seat, and we can give you even more information about this, but you've got to make sure that you place that team member in the right seat and think it through. And here's what people don't do is they think that once they've made them maybe the hostess or they made them the receptionist, that they can't move them because that's what they've hired them for. Move them if needed. They might not be the right person for that, and you might not know that until they're 30 days in. So don't hesitate with moving people around to make sure that they are in the right seat, because that is going to happen. It's happened several times with my clients. So make sure that you're very thoughtful. You know, again, think about the behavioral style, the generations. That's kind of a little bit of the foundation. You know, have them come in for an interview. Make sure you can gauge where their strengths are going to be. And then if they don't work out there, not necessarily do you need to get rid of them. They might thrive in another area of your business.
Chris,
Anything with you on there? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I was going to say, I think that that's really important because it also shows that you're invested in them, not just the job that you need done. And so when it comes to, and you'll hear more from us about this in later presentations about culture and the culture that you're setting. And, you know, nobody wants to feel like a cog in a wheel, a cog in a machine. So being able to really just say, you know, I noticed that this isn't the best for you. What if we moved you here or there, or tried something different? Because that's definitely something that is helps with longevity when it comes to how long people will stay, is if they feel like you've invested in them.
Absolutely. It's all about the relationships. That's why I threw in emotional intelligence, you guys, is because it's all about the relationships that you guys create with the people that work for you and with you and customers and clients. So it's really key. Okay, so helping your team succeed. This is the last thing. Investing in your team. You are more than welcome to share everything that we've gone over today, the recording, the presentation, any of the information. The more that you can invest in your team and educate them, the better. And especially during what we're all living through right now, communication is key with leading. You've got to make sure that you tell people and inform them a little bit more even than what we did before, because people are still a little anxious. They're still a little scared. They're a little bit more stressed than normal. So by communicating, you're kind of including them in your business planning and leading without even really having to do that. And then most important, if anything else that I want to make sure that you guys take home is you have got to be the example. I have had some of the most successful leaders with the bottom line be some of the worst examples for their individuals. And what ends up happening is the turnover is so high that when you kind of shake out all the results at the end of the day, those leaders are losing for the business. So you've got to be an example. If you expect people there on time, you better be there on time. If you expect people to do the dishes, then you better be willing to do the dishes to step up. So you've got to be an example. And I think that is one of the silent best ways to lead people that you could ever lead them. Okay, I'm going to leave the rest of the time open for questions, but what we want to do, I wanted to plant a lot of seeds for you guys, and some of you might take a little bit from the behavioral part, a little bit from the generations part, but I wanted to plant the seed that there's a lot of different factors that you guys have got to consider to make sure that you hire the right person and put them in the right seat. And again, like I said earlier, even if it's more work up front, I promise you it's going to save you time and especially money down the line if you hire the right person. And we can also help you come up with a plan for that too. But Amy, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I think that you covered a lot. And again, these are seeds that are being planted. Someone asked if they could get in contact with you, Chris. And so I will remind everybody, if you're not already a client of the ASB TDC, these are complimentary services, and Chris is part of our team. So you can either go to sbtdc.uark.edu. If you click on get a consultation and your information shows up, that means you're already a client, and you just have to send us an email. You can send information or questions directly to Chris at ccase@walton.uark.edu. But yes, we are readily available. One of the other cool things is that some of our consultants that are consulting you on your business, on your marketing plan, that if you say, I'm really having challenges with human resources or communication or culture, they would bring Chris or Allison or any number of us into that relationship with you. So we're all a big team together, and we love to work together to help you grow as a business as a whole.
Yep, anything you guys we can do for you, we would love to do. We've got all kinds of things, Lindsay. We've got marketing. We've got just about every service that you guys can possibly think of, and we love helping people, if you can't tell. So we are here for you with anything that you need. But any questions, you guys, before we let you go? Anything at all?
Yeah, this is your time.
I have a question there, Chris. Have you seen that the hiring process has changed any since the beginning of the pandemic till now? I know for us, our pool of applicants has went down drastically since the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm not sure, exactly why. I have some theories, but I'd just like to hear your take on since I guess March till now, how that's changed.
Well, Danny, that's funny that you say that, because we had that very conversation this morning on the task force meeting, and with our restaurant forum, they're having trouble. There are 4 restaurants that are wanting to hire, and they're having people apply but not coming in for the interviews, or just kind of breaking off a little bit. I think it will eventually get back to normal, but I think right now, to be honest, I think people are taking unemployment more than what they were before, and I think some people are a little more comfortable doing that, what we here on this phone call would want them to be. And again, not judging at all. It just is that the pool is smaller, and the people that are out there that are unemployed, I think, are sitting back a little bit longer before they jump in for a job. And Amy, do you want to add anything to that? We're
Yeah.
stumped, but we're not surprised.
We are stumped but not surprised. I think some of the other dynamics with the pandemic are teaching children from home. That's a huge challenge right now, and parents having to, either one or the other of them is going to work while the other is staying at home. You literally have cut the workforce in half, and the cost of daycare can't be offset by even the raise in minimum wage at this point. So while in a circumstance like that, sometimes the unemployment is the more appealing option. So when we talked about generations and work-life balance, which by the way is a myth, but everybody keeps trying it. That's been thrown really,
Sounds
really
good.
far. Yeah, it sounds good. That's been thrown off immensely. When it comes to student population and some of those things, their heightened awareness of the pandemic itself, and if they have an option to stay home. So the student population has gone down if you're a big student hirer, and trying to really be conscientious of their roommates and some of those other things, and trying to limit their exposure, and sometimes depending on if it's a service-based business. So really communicating about some of those needs. So if you are an industry that you can be somewhat flexible and conscientious of someone's at-home life, or if they can work from home or anything like that, or flexible hours, or anything that you can communicate that says, we are aware that life has changed and that things are different right now, and we care about that, and we try to accommodate that whenever possible.
And then you probably need people there on site, so I think it might be a little bit more of an upward battle. But you've got my new email address, so make sure you email me, and we can talk a little bit further about that too.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Okay, Amy, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, well, we really do want you to take that assessment. If you were like Lindsay and you were multitasking and taking it while we were talking, that was great too. And hopefully you'll know a little bit more. And we just want to thank you again for being here. And as a registrant and attendee, you will be emailed a copy of this presentation. The recording will be found at asbtdc.uark.edu, and I'll post those links again because we do have a lot of tools and resources. So in the future, you can come find our program just like you did today. You may have found it on social media. So please do follow us on Instagram, Facebook. That's a lot of Lindsay right there. Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn as well. You will also get a survey, so please fill that out so that we can continue to bring these quality programs. And we just want you to say thank you and to please stay in touch. sbtdc.uark.edu, get a consultation if you want some more one-on-one time with us. So thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate you. We'll see you all later.